Assalamu alaikum, good evening, and welcome to tonight's episode of Talking Points. I'm your host, Syed Niaz Ahmed. With us today, there's a young couple of doctors, Dr. Farooq Ahmed and Dr. Aisha Ahsan. They are engaged with National Health Service. They are general practitioner and have been providing very valuable services during the last 18 months of pandemic. Welcome to the show, Farooq and Aisha. How are you today?
Assalamu alaikum. We're well, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we're well.
Thank you. Since you are here for the first time with us, would you like to introduce yourself briefly, both of you? Take your turns.
Yes, sir.
So, hi, I'm Farooq Ahmed. I'm a GP in Southwest 19 in Wimbledon area in Colliers Wood, and I have been there for about 20 years. I qualified as a GP in Epsom, which is not that far further south, and I decided to sort of put my roots down in Colliers Wood. I've been a partner at the practice for 20 years. And have been working with the community for many years on lots of things. My interests are diabetes and ENT, but obviously this last year we've all been exercised by the COVID pandemic and concentrated on how best to look after patients and deliver better care, and more recently since December, the COVID vaccination.
Thank you so much for inviting us. Firstly, it's a pleasure to be on this show with you. I've been a GP now for almost 20 years. I work locally in Sutton. I do some sessions in a local surgery there. And for the last 5 years, I've also been doing some online GP work, some NHS and private work with a firm called Babylon. So I've been doing that, which has been very useful with the recent year and a half during the pandemic, where a lot of GPs have been working from home.
Oh, great, thank you. I just forgot to mention that today is June 6th, the day of Normandy, when 22,000 were killed. The battle to free Europe was launched. Well, we got it out of the way. For nearly 18 months, the world has faced and been trying to grapple with a pandemic, the like of which we have not seen before. The role of the GPs have been highlighted in this very difficult times. How do you see that, and how well have you both performed, and would you really like to see things change, or could things have been planned in a better way? You don't have to be critical, but I just want your analysis.
Sure. So we obviously have struggled with learning about a new disease altogether from scratch. COVID-19 is not something that we're used to. In fact, it's a sort of different virus to the normal cold virus, but the disease and manifestation it causes are very different. And the first few months, it was all about learning how to deal with a completely new disease with absolutely no science behind it. A lot of things were tried and tested in other diseases, and we just sort of translated across how to help patients breathe, how to control their temperature, and so on. And as the science has gone on, we've learned a lot, and we've also learned that patients need us, and we need to be out there for the patients. And it's very difficult to give that level of contact face-to-face and so on in the pandemic. So it's been very difficult and challenging for us and the patients.
Do you agree with that, Dr. Aisha?
Yeah, I think both GPs and patients have had to work around the pandemic, and it's been challenging. I think some people have enjoyed the way that we work now more remotely, and like to just be at a phone call away or a video call away, and they, rather than coming in and waiting for half an hour in the surgery, they like that. And some patients miss that face-to-face contact, especially the elderly. So it's been challenging all around. It's been challenging for us as well to learn new techniques of diagnosis and ways to distinguish who's extremely critical, especially with the COVID symptoms. It was a steep learning curve for us, challenging because at the beginning we didn't know what to expect, which symptoms were COVID.
It was something new that you have not seen before, the world had not seen before.
Yeah.
What is the current situation now? The UK has had a very good record of vaccination, but it seems that we have a lot more rivers to cross now about vaccination.
Yeah, I think, especially people are very wary with the new variants that are coming in, whether the vaccines will be efficient enough with the new variants, and there is work being done to reassure people and to check how effective the vaccinations are. But at the moment they are highly effective, and definitely we would encourage people to receive them. It's the way forward. It's the way to come out of this darkness.
Would you take that this zero death is a good indicator that vaccines are working?
I think we shouldn't forget that one vaccine doesn't confer full immunity. You have to have 2 doses, and quite a lot of patients, especially the younger patients, have probably only had 1 dose.
Right.
So yeah, things will improve, and sometimes it's a bit of a numbers game. So as doctors, we don't like to get too involved in, the 0 deaths on one day may mean 20 deaths the next day and so on. So, some of the data is collected on weekdays only and not weekends. So quite often you'll see quite low figures on a Monday.
Right. So the Monday figures are not representative only for Monday. Sorry.
It's definitely encouraging figures. The death rate coming down is much better than where we were in January, and but we shouldn't get too complacent with it, and we should just make sure that people are just continuing to be safe and following the rules that COVID regulations have.
Well, I read somewhere that there is no specific medicine for COVID-19. So how can people get well?
I think we've come a long way in the 18 months. There's definitely more effective medication that's being used in hospitals, like dexamethasone and various antivirals that have are meant to be decreasing fertility in the hospitals. So I think there are certain drugs that are being used effectively.
What about the test, the blood test and the swab test? Are they both equally reliable?
So the blood test is to check for COVID antibodies. So whether a patient's already had COVID and they've sort of had an immune response to it. Whereas the swab test is to check whether you have COVID infection there and then, whether or not you're symptomatic. So they're slightly different tests, but they are very effective and accurate. So I would, accept that.
How can we protect ourselves? I mean, obviously, one size doesn't fit all. So all these masks and distancing and not mixing people from outside the family and keeping the windows open, meeting people outside the house. Are all these working well, or do we need to take more precautions as the days go by and we learn more about it?
I mean, as the days go by, we are learning more about it, and there may be other things that come up that we don't know now. But for the time being, what we do know is obviously washing hands, social distancing, wearing face protective cover, trying to limit your meetings with other people as much as is possible for your mental well-being as well. I think we need to continue with these precautions as well, of course, as taking the vaccine. I think with all of these precautions, we are looking at a much more positive rate. So, I think we need to continue with that. If further research is done and further measures are brought to our attention, then we will need to include those as well.
With many shops closed, the delivery business of goods bought online is booming. See, now how safe are these delivery boxes left on our doorsteps?
So the virus doesn't really survive on paper. For the virus to survive, it needs, sort of biological fluid, human saliva, and so on. So if there is a virus which lands on the paper, it will die. It can't survive outside of a human host. So yeah, I think paper delivery and so on. I remember initially people were sort of saying, "Oh, we should store it for 3 days and then open it," and so on and so forth. But I think it's fine. It's okay.
But I just take precautions like washing your hands afterwards. You still should take there's no harm in that. There's no damage done
because
by doing
I usually leave it in the sun for some time, an hour or two. But make sure that there's nothing, no liquid inside, otherwise it might evaporate. See, thank you. We need to take a break here, and when we come back, we'll continue with this very interesting discussion with both of you. Don't go away. We'll be back soon. Thank you. Welcome back. Just before the break, we were talking to our guests today about the various aspects of the pandemic, COVID-19. I had asked, the last question was about the mail left on your doorstep, and it seems it is pretty safe. Now, I have another question. What about the pets? Do they play any role, negative or positive? If you have a pet like a cat or a dog in your house, and or guinea pigs, would they improve the situation, or would they contribute to the spread of the virus? Yes, sir.
So, as far as I'm aware, we certainly haven't seen many pet-to-human transmission of viruses, and certainly most people with pets have a lot of goodness that they derive from having pets. Sense of security and friendship, and it helps them with social isolation and so on. So I wouldn't sort of tell people to get rid of their pets and so on just because of this. And so there's more benefits in having a pet for people who have pets. The risks of catching COVID vaccine or transferring it via the pets, I think it's minimal.
I don't think there's many reports to show that there have been any pets that have been infected.
There is no report, but does that mean that no study has been made so far on that?
I think vets would have picked it up if animals had started to become quite unwell. So I think that something would have been reported even if studies hadn't been done. But definitely I would agree with Farid that the pets have helped a lot of people with social isolation, elderly or people who live on their own, who've just had their pet for support. So the mental well-being is definitely improved with these people, with people who have pets.
I was just wondering because it is said, it is rumored that it all started from some sort of bird, some sort of animal, some sort of bats, we do not know, isn't it? It all started from somewhere in China, and which Mr. Trump very famously used to call Chinese virus. See, we don't. That's not.
I think we've learned because of time and experience that the virus is not really designated to a country or a region. It is a virus. It's we live in a very international world now, where people travel for trade, business, tourism, etc. The virus it's an international virus, really.
Right.
And recently we've seen that we've sort of decided to label them on sort of the kind of Greek numerals, so alpha, beta, and so on.
Sure. Just like COVID-19, it doesn't have to do anything with a place called Wuhan. Dr. Aisha, COVID symptoms are pretty public now. Everybody knows about it. But what are post-COVID conditions or returning or ongoing health problems that people can suffer?
So I think this is a big worry for us, because long COVID, as we class it, is very rampant, especially in maybe younger women. Sort of 30 to 45-year-old women are meant to be the most debilitated by it. And long COVID often is presenting mainly with headaches. The fatigue is extreme. Fatigue is so bad that it's debilitating in their daily life. They can't go to work, they can't function. Cooking, cleaning is a problem for them. So headaches and fatigue are the main two symptoms. Muscle aches, and just feeling extremely run down. There's a lot of mental problems as well with long COVID. And now we're setting up long COVID clinics in different areas to support people who are suffering with this. It's going to be something that we're going to have to deal with for at least a while.
Well, as a general practitioner, you see both males and females. But do you think women and children are at a greater risk of getting COVID-19? And if yes, then how to take precautions?
Well, I think everyone is at risk, really. I think what makes it difficult in some instances, especially in Asian women, is they tend to be quite low in vitamin D levels. Vitamin D, we find having high levels of vitamin D helps protect patients from the sort of negative consequences of COVID-19. So yes, it affects women slightly worse in some instances, but it's not necessarily due to their sex, but it's just the way women might be living their lives, etc. Maybe being more indoors, hidden away from the sunshine and so on. So having good levels of vitamin D will help. And I suppose that will affect our children as well, because a lot of children are on their phones or games in darkened rooms away from sunshine, and perhaps suffering low levels of vitamin D. So I think it's that rather than their sex, which puts them in a difficult position.
We have just come out of a long winter. Even the months March and May, where they seemed like part of the winter season. So it seems that weather does have an impact on the mood, of course, yes, but the virus too, is it?
Yeah, winter, you'd have people huddled in warm rooms with the windows closed and so on. So even if it's all about concentration. So if imagine you have a room and you have 100 viruses, imagine the same room with windows open on either side. That 100 virus will, dissipate and spread through the windows to other places. So in the end, you'll only get left with 2 viruses perhaps in the room, and therefore the likelihood of those viruses infecting you would be minimal. So it's just you're reducing your risk by having good ventilation, plenty of fresh air, and so on. And in winter, obviously, we like to stay warm, and it's difficult.
Are there good viruses?
Viruses have been around for a long, long time. I think they have an integral function in how we've evolved as a species. And
builds up your immunity. By getting a virus, you also build up your immunity to fight off other viruses. So every human body has to go through that to be stronger. So there is a positive effect of a virus as well.
Right. When I asked that question, I had the flu virus jab in my mind, because I take it every year, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, that's because the flu virus jab only is for a certain strain of the flu virus. So it doesn't mean that you won't get flu, It just means that you won't get that strain of flu, which could be more severe than other strains. So you may still get flu-like symptoms.
Right. That brings me to the very related question of mutations. So all these mutations and the virus changing, coming back and attacking us in a different guise, like as Dr. Farooq said, that the Delta and Beta. So this vaccine that has been dispensed to so many millions of people, will it protect the people from the newest strains, the mutations and the new strains of like what is called Indian or Nepali strain of the virus?
Yeah, so I think we've seen some research come out recently that a Pfizer vaccine, for example, will protect against the Delta variant by maybe up to 88% even with 2 doses. But yeah, I think the fact that we are having variants is a sign that the disease is not in controlled way worldwide. So you will always get variants when there's a large population affected. And I think that's what's happened in India, that's what's happened in Brazil, and so on.
I do think we're finding that the population who've had the 2 doses of vaccine, if they are getting infected with the virus, the symptoms are a lot less milder, and the repercussions are a lot less.
So are studies being made on that particular aspect, that those who are getting, after the 2 vaccines, those who are getting COVID-19, the symptoms, the conditions are not as severe as would have been without the vaccines?
Absolutely.
That's correct.
Right. Dr. Farooq, what impact has had the virus on the environment? I mean, we talked about the pets, we talked about keeping the windows open, see, but I'm talking about the environment in general. The virus has come from some problem somewhere in the environment, and so what impact has, I mean, it has made a great impact on our lives, on our work and lifestyle, but what impact has it made on the environment, like the flora, the fauna, the weather?
I think certainly my patients with respiratory conditions are complaining less of exacerbations, because especially last year the level of carbon dioxide and pollution was a lot less. People are traveling less, less flights, less airline pollution, and so on. So that has an effect on people's lungs. So people are healthier that way. Of course, if they're feeling miserable, they might take to smoking, and they smoke more and cause more damage. Yeah, the environment that is external will be improving. I sort of remember seeing videos shared online about sort of dolphins and things visiting people in Venice, in the lagoons and so on, because before it used to be very dirty water, and it changed. So yes, I think as a human species we are capable of destroying the environment around us, but we're equally capable of making it a better place for everyone, all creatures. So I think the pandemic has forced us to change our lives, and sometimes maybe for the better. And I think as a clinician, it's not for us to judge society, but clearly there's some bigger questions around how we travel, how we pollute the world, how we affect our planet, and it's very much a live debate.
Yeah, probably it's too early, because only been a year and 6 months. So I'm sure that future virologists and other doctors and people engaged in research would find out the impact on a larger scale. But right now, we have to accept what it is, and we have got to try to meet the challenges of the virus itself, right?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Okay then, we need to take a break right now, and then when we come back, we'll again pick up the make of it and get rid of it. Thank you. Welcome back. We are talking to our guests today, Dr. Farooq Ahmed and Dr. Aisha Ahsan. This is a husband and wife team. They are GPs and they practice in the Wimbledon area of South London. Dr. Farooq, you have been involved with the community service, particularly with the vaccination programs, and also earlier you have been involved in the diabetes projects of the community. Could you throw some light on that, please?
So I think it's interesting because diabetes affects a lot of people in ethnic minority communities, and it does have a negative link with COVID illnesses, because if somebody has diabetes, they tend to have a slightly worse outcome with COVID-19, or they're more at risk. So it's very important they look after their diabetes better, check their sugars regularly, avoid sweet stuff and exercise more and so on. So I did do some webinars with local East Merton community projects and so on in Merton with ethnic minority communities to encourage them to become more healthy, exercise more. And with the COVID-19 vaccination, I led some of the community projects in our area with COVID-19 vaccinations in community centres, in mosques, both first and second doses. And it was really great to see everyone from community attend these vaccination clinics, Muslims, non-Muslims, white, black, everyone.
Wow, non-Muslims coming to mosques.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because and some of them came to me and said, it's a really great experience of community, and having something good from a mosque. For some of them, it was the first time they were coming to a mosque, and they had good feeling about that experience.
And the mosque members were very, very good in setting up the clinic and helping organise. All volunteers from the mosque helped us organise the COVID vaccinations, sort of directing, and it was a real sort of team effort.
Great. Were you there too?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Dr. Aisha, obviously this has upset us and upset a lot of people, this COVID-19, and has caused a lot of trouble to many communities. But you as a doctor and a lady doctor, what are your views how women have taken this idea of going through this vaccination twice, and are there any rumors, any apprehensions amongst the females of the part of the society? Are they happy to go ahead with it, or they think that it is not effective or it might cause some problems?
Yeah, I think many women have had doubts and issues, and have read lots of information. One of the main sort of rumours that had been going around, I think especially in our community, was about issues of fertility and how it had, by taking the vaccination, would decrease your chances of having a child, decrease fertility in that age group, which was just rumour. There was no scientific evidence behind it, no research done that would support that. So a lot of the time we were trying to reassure patients. A lot of women would take it very happily and would want to come back earlier for their second dose. So there was a variety of response, but I think the worrying one is when people are trying to avoid the vaccine. Some people are just scared of taking them. Some women are scared of taking the vaccinations because they're not sure what side effects it will have. But really, there is no evidence to say there are any long-term side effects from the vaccination, and to reassure women that you know, to have it done. It's definitely the way forward in these times.
Well, as you said, that apparently there are no side effects, but have any studies been made into that? I know it's just too early because...
I mean, there have been some side effects with, you know, headaches and fatigue and muscle tiredness, and obviously the AZ vaccine with the increased risk of clots. But we have to be aware that, especially if we're talking about women, that the increased risk of clots with the vaccination is a lot less than women have risks with pregnancy and clots, or even taking the contraceptive pill and clots. You know, there's a risk in both those things. It increases your risk of having clots, but the vaccination's risk is a lot less.
We have a lot of vaccines on the market. Different countries are using, have a preference to use one kind other than the other. Are they as effective as the other, or one is more than the other? Any idea?
I think they're pretty much all the same. I think it's really important to understand that the flu vaccine, which a lot of patients have without any question, confers you about 65 to 70% immunity. On balance, the COVID-19 vaccinations will give you 85 to 90% immunity. So immediately after both doses. So immediately you know that this vaccine is far superior where it works. And this applies to all of them. So whether it's Pfizer, AZ, or others in other countries.
Yeah, but some of the vaccines have not been tested like the ones that's coming now from China.
I think our testing of vaccinations in this country is quite rigorous. So the two that have been tested here, which is what we deal with really, the AZ and the Pfizer ones mainly. I think Moderna's been given as well now. But these have gone through rigorous testing here, so we can be sure that they're quite safe and effective.
Right. We've talked about the ladies, we've talked about the men in business and all that. Children to the school. If you have them in mind, how can someone be infected by COVID-19? I mean, the children, as I said before, that they're not as careful as we would like them to be. And you just said, Dr. Asha says, so some 20-year-old not behaving properly, and that in a way that they were not using masks and not distancing themselves. But the children are children, and when at a school, in the school environment, and there are 15 to 20 children in one classroom, a teacher is not enough to keep them all distanced all the time, and when out in the playground, they are there, they can't keep the distance. So are they more likely to be infected?
I guess the risk is there. They are increased risk of passing the virus from one child to the other. But you have to remember that the mental well-being of a child, of being at school, is much more important. If the child is taught social distancing as much as possible, then that will decrease the risk. And then when they come home, when they're exposing it to adults in their home, they have to make sure that, you know, they've used proper washing facilities, washing techniques before they're exposed to adults in the house. But I think, you know, it's very important. We can't take the child out of school now. The children have been neglected for a while from the sort of social aspects of school, if not the academic.
Even the academic part is being taken care of, and it is going to involve a lot of millions and millions of pounds to provide especially coaching.
For some children.
Yes, to some children, not all, of course. We talked about poorly ventilated rooms and houses. When it comes to ethnic minorities, it was rumored that they suffer most, you see. Is it because of our lifestyle? Is it because of our eating style? Is it because that we are crammed in smaller flats or houses?
I think it's multifactorial. We have, and it's a good thing, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's a good thing that we have multi-generational households. We look after our elderly people in the same household as we look after our children.
Right.
And that's, not only unique to Asian community, it's also quite common amongst Italians. And one of the reasons Italian communities in the north of Italy had issues was also the same thing, multi-generational household. In our communities, we also have Asian ethnic minority patients who live in deprived households, perhaps multi-occupancy households, and so on. So all those factors affect us. It may be that Asian ethnic minority patients are working in jobs which expose them, so bus drivers, cab drivers, and so on. And even more reason that people from our ethnic minorities get vaccinated, get both the vaccines done, but also for the government and the bigger systems to recognize this and do something about it.
Right.
The bus drivers were not sort of highlighted amongst the vaccination groups.
Right.
Maybe people like that should have been on high levels. Obviously, that's something for the government to think about.
Comorbidities. A lot of Asians and ethnic minorities will have a lot more comorbidities. So they will have more heart disease, more diabetes, which makes them more prone to the virus. So again, that's a reason. Even the Afro-Caribbeans, they often have heart problems, heart disease, blood pressure.
One final question: can the coronavirus spread through food?
There's no evidence.
There's no evidence that it does. So please go ahead and enjoy
The curry.
Curries and so on, and give them some business, because a lot of these restaurants, they need help.
I think, but when you're eating out, you need to just be aware that, you are socially distanced as much as possible. You're using the hand gels, the sanitizers, washing. If you can sit in a more ventilated area, that would be better. All these common things to be put in place.
Right.
Food, particularly, itself.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farooq and Dr. Aisha Hassan. It was a pleasure hosting you, and we wish you well in your profession, and we wish you very well in the fight against coronavirus. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you so much for having us.
See you again sometime, inshallah. Thank you, viewers, for being with us. We hope that we have come out a little bit more informed about the coronavirus. And see you again, same time, same channel, next week. Bye for now.